Call the Infrastructure and Property Committee meeting to order. Committee members, Rob Carmichael, I'm here. Paul Bissonnette.
Here.
Paul Gobbin.
Here.
First item on the agenda is the Historical Society Building Project Proposal. Sue, would you kind of kick this off? I know we've got a lot of information in front of us.
Rich is actually the one who's been shepherding this project since the council approved the expenditure of $5,000 to look at the potential for moving this, upgrading this building and raising it, literally, moving it some. Rich has been meeting with the architects and the Historical Society, so I'll let him discuss this.
Thank you. And Jeff Hammond, Larry Wall, and the architects are all here. We've all met on a number of occasions. This originally came out of the Infrastructure Committee back in November. About the same time, the ADAPT plan had come out just after your approval to look into this building. So when the town allocated the funds, it was to look at the building, raising the building, what would that cost be? What we did was, since we were in that area, the ADAPT plan came out to utilize the professional services we already had, pay for that service once, and take the project on the site area, because we own all the land in that area. So what you see in front of you is a proposal for a whole site plan versus just a building, because at some point, some group would have come to you asking you to hire the services to do it again. So the plan was, let's do it one time, let's take care of it that way. So I'm going to let the architect speak to you now about the plan. Charlie Early and Jim T, because I can't pronounce his last name. Thank you, guys.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a long time since we started. We've had a lot of, about every 2 weeks, we would meet at Louis Simon and go through ideas and things we were analyzing. We're going to give you a short overview tonight. There's a lot of information, and to pack it in as quickly as we need to tonight, if we need to have subsequent conversations, that's fine with us. But I'd like to go through the whole thing, and if we could hold the questions till the end, that would help it move along in terms of what we're going to be talking about. Can we do something to the lights? Thank you. So we had a team made up of the members you already know, Rich Rotello, Larry Wall, and Jeff Hammond, myself, and Jim Tackenhorst. Mike Pullen, who has worked with Larry a lot on the library, you probably know that name. He was helping us as an advisor on the historic preservation side of things. I've worked extensively with him in my career, and we have a very good relationship, so we thought that'd be a good idea. We had Kyla Magnuson of PCM. She's a professional construction estimator, so when we finally got to the point where we knew what we were talking about, we gave the drawings and a materials outline to her, and she helped price it. And that pricing includes lots of contingencies, so when we get to that slide, we'll talk about that. And then we also consulted Michael Gerber-Bain at the National Register for Maine about this building. When we started into it, that the focus was really on that historic building, and it remained on that, but you'll see that what that means. So everything has a past, everything, a person, an object, a word, everything. If you don't know the past, you can't understand the present and properly plan for the future. You don't need to say in Bucksport that we're planning for the future as a result of what took place with the mill. But that's kind of a quote motto that we carried through as we went through this. We set up some objectives that were, the key objectives are outlined here. One was, as we saw the ADAPT plan become complete and we looked at it, we said, wow, this is a centerpiece. So we have to advance that master plan concept for what we're calling a central gateway site in Bucksport, and the presentation will demonstrate that a little bit more. We have the potential on this site to enlarge a central waterfront area for our events and festivals in town. We want to enhance the visitor pedestrian experience and create more public benefit than we already have, all again focused on that site. Incorporate new public restrooms in the lower level of the building. So the old ones that are in there, they're kind of an obstruction to the idea of developing that site from the master plan level. Then we looked up and down Main Street, and I'm very familiar with it, you all are too. A visitor that comes to Main Street doesn't know how to get to the waterfront easily once they've come into downtown. If they parked at the end, yes, they know, but they already know. But most of them come to go to Larry's and get an ice cream, then they turn around with their cone and they go, I see that walkway, how do I get to it? So the question of an ADA access between Main Street, which is 12 feet higher than the waterfront walkway, became an element of the project that we thought this is a great opportunity to not only create this gateway situation, but to provide the option to make an ADA access from Main Street to the waterfront. We want to respect the historic former railroad building. It's now a museum. It's no longer a railroad station. There's a lot of things about that. Determine the benefits of lifting it and relocating it. The Historical Society wants to insulate and heat and humidify that building for year-round use. And they also want to increase the space of that building to bring in the idea of having a paper mill museum exhibit downstairs using artifacts and the history of the mill itself. So those were our main objectives. I think you're probably familiar with the ADAPT master plan, but this central site, the one thing they did was they noted Historic Society and Welcome Center, but they sort of helicopter viewed this. They ignored the historic building in terms of what it is as a piece of architecture, and they just put this L-shaped thing on it in this master plan that you can't do that. You can't engulf that building and still respect it as an architectural feat. But this site, one reason we call it a gateway, it has a very unique location in terms of our Main Street. Most everything else is driven past. This site has the potential for a long view because of this bend in the road. So we were looking at that and looking at the streetscape here across the front. The master plan calls for a front streetscape to continue, and you'll see historically it was also the case on this site. We looked at the context of the building, as I mentioned, and then the waterfront access point we talked about. There are developments that are happening here, that this site used to just be the town of Bucksport was railway, back and forth, was the main circulation. That continues today with pedestrian back and forth, but people coming with small craft to this area often use this zone to come in to get up to Main Street. And then last summer we had them, and we may have some again, the cruise ships, when they drop off a boatload of people, it's really a boatload of people, they land where? In the parking lot. So the potential to develop this site for something more is very high. Then there's the interesting part that you own the land that goes here. It's one of the few sites where your land ownership connects and has a development potential to Main Street. So you own the whole waterfront, and then you own that land as well. So we talked about gateway elements, and Jeff triggered this one. He asked the question, what's a gateway, and what does that mean? Well, what it means is when you're crossing that observation bridge and you look at the coastline of Bucksport, we need to have something that makes them want to turn left when they're over there at the bridge, not when they get to the second bridge. When they first get a chance to see it, when they're vacationing and they're visiting Fort Knox and they look at the coastline of Bucksport, what do they see that says, I want to go there, I want to see that, I want to check that out? So curiosity and awareness of something that's happening there. And I don't know all the answers yet about what that is, but we've got potential for that here. So things like international flags and special lighting, wayfinding, perhaps gateway things like this, seasonal banners and things that are full of color. A kiosk has been talked about in terms of the Welcome Center, because there's the idea that the info center is with the Chamber of Commerce, and this could be an electronic type thing that's part of the museum downstairs. You come in there and you could ask questions, where can I eat in Bucksport? And nobody has to be there to talk to you. They'd be welcome to have somebody there, but in terms of staffing, maybe it's easier to do it electronically. Landscaping, of course, and other elements. And then our feature piece in the gateway is this historic building, and there's a problem with that. And we'll see that, and you probably all know what I'm talking about, but I'll get to it. Gateway activities, we all know the types of things that can happen on the waterfront in terms of festivals and different things, outdoor theater, bouncy house during festivals, or vendor tents, and food trucks and all that type of stuff, outdoor chests. There's a multitude of ideas that could happen to help develop that as an exciting space to be part of. So you own the land, and other than the historic building, the site really lacks historic context. And that's just when you walk out there today and you look at the building, the railroad tracks are gone. It was put on the register with the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks are gone. The signage is gone. The ramp around it, the platform around the building is gone. There's one little sign, diamond-shaped, number 6, and that is a railroad designation of some sort, that this might have been number 6 along the line. That's still there. But you don't, when you look at it, there's no context, which makes it interesting because now we've got landscaping and bathrooms and other things that don't have anything to do with railroad. The sewer line, the other things are just things as you already know. The sewer line was placed in the late 80s. These were the bathrooms in 1995. They need to be upgraded or removed, and we've got that again. It's an ideal location for an ADA walkway. On the historic building notes, they've owned it, the Historical Society, since 1965 or so. It's on the National Register since 1975. That chimney has been removed. It was deteriorating. It was taken out in 14 or 15. As you well know, it was painted in 2017, and I think you helped replace the roof in 2018, and it was done with asphalt shingles. This building would have probably originally had wooden cedar shakes type roof. It's a wood frame structure on piers. It's elevated. It's with the proper bracing, it's feasible to lift it and move it relatively easily. We don't know anything about the under condition, if we've got carpenter ant issues or anything structurally. We'd have to get down into that if the project went forward. But it's feasible to lift this and move it. You see at that time, the railroad tracks were here. This wooden fence was back there. And there's that little sign. You can't see it. It's behind the end there of the number 6. So we started going back, and Larry helped us a lot with this. He was digging up maps at the library, and he showed up with some of these. And in 1881 and 1885, this building, we feel, based on maps only, we couldn't find any photography. This building, this railroad station was not here at the end of Mechanic Street. It was over here, in between Mechanics, and I forget what the name of that street is, up there. But about half a block over, and we had a large platform around it. Again, that'll come up later. But there was a hotel called the Riverside Hotel here, and it had a storefront that continued like the rest of them here. That's the meaning of those red lines. So in master plan language, that's something that later changed, and it changed pretty dramatically. This is another map. This one's from 1885, and that red circle is around that same depot in that location. That red line is Mechanic Street. So we kind of thought, wow, this building, this is when we were thinking about it historically, and we were trying to justify, well, can we, you know, if it's not in its original site, is that an issue in terms of the National Register? So the other thing that's interesting here is this is single line rail in 1881 and 85. And this is another clue that we kind of are doing forensics. When we look at 1895, there are 2 tracks here, and that building has moved from over here to over here where it now sits and where it's sat since then. So that's what we think happened. There was another one further down at the wharf that was, we think, a goods and services type thing, maybe passenger, but mostly goods. And it was on the other side of the tracks. And we have a photograph that proved that. And there was it was the same building type. The building is now set back from Main Street, so we have that hole, and that's the problem. When you drive by, we all know it, you see the roof of this beautiful building. You don't see up underneath those brackets, and you don't get to appreciate the architecture of the building because from the street, you don't see it. You just see the roof and about, I don't know, 3 feet up of the top of the building, of the elevation. We assumed that the land side was used for some drop-off for trains. These are just things that we noticed on the map. They're not so important. So when it was put on the register, this side of it, the north side, was lawn, and then they drove in over here into that parking lot that's down there below. And there's the railroad station building. There's that wooden fence. There at that time, I said, the tracks were part of the context. The tracks were part of the National Register of the building at that time. So when it got put on the register, we needed to find out what's the situation with that. And I've already talked about the site context, but there are no restrictions or easements on record with the state in terms of anything that's been done to the building, or where somebody could say, no, you can't move it. That was important to find out. Or any financial things where they funded something and said, oh, because we funded it, now you, for a period of time, can't do anything to change that. But the committee never had a doubt about the importance of preserving this historic building, because it's a very beautiful thing. And so lifting it 6 to 8 inches, if we lift it more than 6 to 8 inches, it will impact that context, and that will mean the building would have to come off the National Register. National Register is a voluntary thing that you apply for, and it's an honor to have that. But if you move a train station away from the ground, and we would be doing it 6 to 7 feet from its current location, and it's already up 3 or 3.5 feet or so where the platform would have been, that's missing right there, that level. So if you do that, it's going to come off the register, because it no longer has the context that ironically no longer exists, which is the site. But in their eyes, it becomes not a railroad station when you put it up on Main Street, because it couldn't have the context of tracks and things. So Larry checked also with the Historical Society to make sure that nobody in that organization has any objections to the idea. These are just things we did as we went along the way. So when we talk about the site, everybody knows that this site is in this area, and we look across and we see the observation bridge in Fort Knox. It's quite a majestic view. And there are a lot of things that can go on at the high season when boats are coming in and things like that. You've got a lot of circulation. But this one in the future is one that we think, based on Rich's work and the cruise ships and that sort of thing, that we're going to have this. We have now a site where people are coming. It's a gateway from both sides. It's a gateway from the water, and it's a gateway from the land. And so connecting it really makes sense to us in terms of pedestrian traffic. The other thing is, because it's a parking lot, and the existing parking lots over here, that's a quite dysfunctional thing. People park there. A couple of people from the bank, one person has a Subaru and can't drive around and park over here, so they park there. Some of those town people park there, some marina people. But when something happens like a festival, this just gets filled up with stuff and you can't use it, you can't park there. This parking is not ideal because it's on a slope. So you get out on the right-hand side, your door swings open and bangs the car next to you, or you have to push it open on the left-hand side. But this pedestrian hub idea is people walking down, up and down, and when you walk that from one end to the other, it's a pretty long walk. It'd be kind of nice midpoint to have something happen there and know what it is. We walked by this many times when I first started working in Bucksport, and I didn't know what that building was. And I finally asked somebody, what is that? You know, and found out. Of course, we talked about relocating the public toilets, but the idea is off of this crossroads, have an area that's more like a plaza by taking this existing building and moving it up closer to Main Street and getting it more in a line with, say, the front of Camden National. And this isn't the be-all, end-all, but when you see the plans, these white circles, what that means is there's an opportunity there to widen the sidewalk and create a space on Main Street that could be for smaller events, like, say, Wednesday on Main could do a thing there, Wednesday night on Main, or just a pause in the sidewalk structure of town. On this side, we're talking removing that and creating a plaza that is a multi-use plaza. Larry wanted to have an amphitheater, but an amphitheater with ADA on that site doesn't physically work, and it would crowd the site, and it wouldn't work in terms of making the building accessible. We took time to analyze the ordinance. This is the site plan. It's constructed, this is a disclaimer, it's constructed of various surveys that were done and various plans that Jeff dug out and various sketches and things. It's not, we didn't have one survey for the whole site. That would need to be done. But it does show the site area is this line right here is the kind of the property lines. That's the edge of Camden National Bank's retaining wall. And then this hatched area, this diagonally hatched area, that's the developable land area within which we could operate in terms of this site. And this line right here is the setback of 25 feet from the walkway, which is from the ordinance. We have a little bit of nonconformity with that 5-foot overhang roof that goes all the way around the building right here in this corner. That wall is pretty close to that 25 feet. It's probably maybe 24 feet or something, but then the roof overhangs. So there's a little bit of nonconformity there. And we talked about, you know, whether that's a justification of moving it, that we want to make the building conform. It's not non-conforming in such a bad way. We have the existing walkway that goes up here that's sort of hard to find. And then there is an existing, this is stormwater drainage right here that comes down and goes through the site and daylights out here. And the sewer is somewhere down here running along the waterfront. I think picks up those bathrooms right there. So when we move the plan, now we're up at street level. And we go back to history and we talk about what's the metaphor. The metaphor is the platform that was around the building historically when it was in use as a railroad station. So we took that and we abstracted that and said, well, now we don't have trains, but we do have the potential for people on both sides. What about if we created a platform on which this building could sit up at Main Street level? And then pedestrians can walk around the building and see those nice brackets and circumvent the building, and at the same time get an elevated view, like an overlook, from a deck on this side of the building of the bridge and Fort Knox and the water. And if you have festivals and things going on and you've loaded that up with vendor tents down here in the plaza area, someone on this level can look right across the top of them. They don't lose that view, so you have both things working. Trying to get things working at both levels so that the action isn't just on one level. It can be on two. So in the building, there'd be some minor adjustments to what's going on. This side of the building is not as historic looking on the inside as this. This looks like kind of 1970s in some areas. It's just got paneling on it, but these areas are very nice. We have to get downstairs, so we put a stair there. This would be the tool exhibit, which if you've been in there, that's a fascinating exhibit. And we decided to make that something you walk through to get to this room as a corridor sort of thing that has two pockets on each side. The bathroom needs to be an ADA compliant one, and then there'd be a little work room for the curator to do things in there. There'd be a stair down here, and we think that this walkway could be enhanced going down to and made a little bit wider to bring it down, and then revise the parking here. We of course lose the existing parking. This is the idea for the ADA ramp. 12 feet is a lot to overcome. That's a lot of ramp. And we've priced it separately so you know what we're talking about as an object, that could be its own project. That retaining wall is from the 50s. It's seen better days. So the idea is also that this construction could act as a new retaining wall between Camden National and this property. Let's see, then if we want green buffer, we can put some green buffer down here. The ordinance doesn't require that anymore, but probably think it would probably be a good idea. But that's about it on that level. This existing building, by the way, is 66 by 24.4, and so you understand the next one. This is the water level, and the building is underneath it is wider, 101 feet long, 24 feet wide. The new bathrooms, public bathrooms, would be here, and they'd be 24/7, so they've got their own corridor, janitor's closet there with a mop sink for cleaning up. And then the museum could also have access on that level to those bathrooms. This is similar to what we did when we worked with Catherine on the Lighthouse Arts Center. If we have an ADA access at the street level and an ADA access at the lower level, we don't have to connect the building with an elevator because an impaired person can get to it on either side. So you have a main entrance here too. And this would be the museum space, thinking that would be for the paper mill museum area. New mechanical because they want to. The building is uninsulated. It doesn't have any MEP except for the bathroom, so it doesn't have any mechanical in there. It does have electrical, but there's no mechanical systems in there, so that would be housed down in the new building. and then an office area down here. And on this site, that's the main thing. Now, remember that stormwater drain, that runs right through here. So we don't think if we're building this into the this is a lot of concrete building back into that 12-foot height difference, that stormwater drain would need to be relocated as part of the project. So when we're looking at this holistically as a site, that was one thing that happened. The sewer can probably just be protected and stay where it is and reconnect the new bathrooms. So now from the street level, I'll go to this one first. Now we could bring the building up to where you actually get to see it. And from the waterfront, we took an abstraction from railroad thinking, boxcar type stuff, and totally abstracted it, but to give us some sort of a theme for the bottom of this building. It's not going to imitate a boxcar, it's just going to have some lines and materials and colors and make you think that. There's some sliding doors here on this pocket that you could close, and then that's the bathroom entrance, and then this skirt here could be a dark anthracite so that you've got an elevated facade down there, and then above is that wide panoramic view. But there, the red boxes outline where the roof was, and this shows you where the roof would be if you lift it. So that's a 3D view of it. Makes it a little bit clearer what's going on with the idea. The shapes and things, we just did it this way. It could be curved, it could be whatever. But the idea is that you have a protected area down here off of that plaza, which would be also good that you've got some automatic shading area that's wide enough for people that you could have some seating underneath their benches and things like that. We didn't get into rendering that in plan. That's the new wide walkway, and that would be the parking coming down. That's the ADA ramp coming around. And we were talking about using wood and metal, and so this is with stainless steel cable running through a wood framing of the railings and things like that to get some transparency and kind of, again, hint at the abstraction of railroad tracks in a different plane, just some subliminal architectural thing. So then the big issue is then, okay, what does something like this cost? And when you're at the concept level, you've got to be careful that you think in terms of the fact that it may take some time to get this thing funded, and maybe time may go by, and there's inflation. So we broke it, we had it all estimated, and yes, it comes to that total, but let me explain to you how it's broken down. It will take about $30,000 for all of the demolition and removals on that site. That's the bathrooms and opening up the sewer and all that stuff, and the stormwater drainage. Lifting and relocating the historic building due to its length primarily, that's a little bit higher than we normally would see, but we think that's it's about $43,240 to brace it, lift it, put it on cribbage, and then on cribbing, not cribbage, on cribbing, and then move it over to a new foundation or base building. The renovation of that building, that's the interior of the building, and anything that's more the architectural side, insulating it and getting it reclad and all that sort of stuff. We separated the mechanical. You'll see that later. Then the new construction and platform is around $360,000. It's a lot of concrete. It's basically a retaining structure holding that 12 feet back. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing came in at $329,940, and that's got soup to nuts, everything we need for the bathrooms and the mechanical and the humidity control and that sort of thing. That's a more expensive system than you would put in a regular building. The humidity control costs more. But for the artifacts, that's something that we think is necessary. The ADA ramp construction came out at $117,000 for that part of the project. The infrastructure and site development, and that's soup to nuts. That's all the lighting, all the flags, all the benches, all the landscape, all the grunt work of the site development, realigning the storm drain and the sewer and all that sort of thing. And then general overhead and profit and general conditions and overhead and profit and bonds for the general contractor estimated at $234,783. And then there's the administrative and reserve section of the budget. I have a detailed budget based on this number where these all came from. But we have 4 contingencies in this. a design contingency because we haven't designed anything in detail, and so things might change. An estimate contingency because we're giving a 4 or 5 page description of materials and not specs, not a ream of paper that describes it. And then you have your regular bid contingency, 5%, and 5% construction contingency, so that you have flexibility after the bid. And we pulled that all out because we really those things we don't know yet, and we won't know until time goes by. And what happens is if you have that gives your budget. If something changes in use or something changes in the idea, you move money up into construction. It generates fee. If it generates work, it generates fee. And so that's a very flexible thing to consider. It's about 20% design contingency and estimate contingency, and 10% for the bid and construction, divided in those 2 5s. And then the fees and services for geotechnical survey, regular topographic and border survey, and those type of things, our fee, the engineer's fee to do all the design work and things like that. So it brought us to this $2,283,805 number today. And so the next question is, there are a lot of questions, and I imagine you probably have some questions, so I think we'll just wrap at that point and take any questions from you. Thank you for your attentiveness and your time.
Any on the board have any questions on the committee at this point? There's a lot to absorb in a short amount of time, but.
Yeah, I'll start off. One question I have is, and I'm not seeing it, so correct me if I'm wrong, is there a way that this project could be done in stages, meaning, and I'm not seeing it, so but I'm just
Yes.
ensuring that I'm seeing it correctly.
Yes, it's
Okay.
been part of our thinking all along that you could say, let's just get this ADA ramp done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ADA ramp, you got to think about the historic building being there with an ADA ramp next to it. But the ADA ramp could be separated out into its own project.
What about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, what about moving the building though?
Well, yes, when you move the building, that could be a project, but you got to have something to put it on.
Right.
And who owns it?
Mm-hmm.
The Historic Society owns the building, you own the land. Now let's say the town builds a building underneath this, just for the sake of discussion. Now, what's the relationship between the Historical Society in terms of that new museum space? Who's curating it? Who owns it? And what does it do to the ownership of the building? And how does that work out? And I'm sure there are ways to figure that out. But if you're going to build a building, the biggest question is who's going to pay for it and how much is it going to cost. So the building would need to be done. So you'd have to take several of those steps in order to do that as a separate project. And it could be set up. I don't know if you would want to do that, but you could set it up that it's ready to put in the mechanical equipment, but you don't do that right away. But then you don't have that year-round use. You don't have the protection of the artifacts and so on. The infrastructural things, they would have to go. If you're going to build that building, you're going to want to not have that underneath the building. You're going to want to have it on the perimeter of it.
And the prices of all of those things don't tend to go down as you.
No, the prices, everybody has heard what prices have been doing in the last 2 years in the state of Maine for many reasons.
Yep.
And so that's another reason to have a good safety valve in your project, in your thinking, until you know more. And obviously, that's a lot of money, and more than likely you can do it for less, and you can make design decisions. And the question is, what's the list of musts and what's the list of nice to have, and that sort of thing.
What about grants? If it's changed and it's taken off the historical register, does that affect any opportunity grants that we could get, or maybe we couldn't have gotten any to begin with? But does that affect any of that stuff that you're aware of?
Well, if it comes off the register, then it's not eligible for any grants that
No,
relate to
that's-
historic
that's what I figured. I
properties.
just wanted to ask,
The I'm trying to think of what grant program would be, it, you know, would have to be tied into the waterfront development and that kind of stuff in order to qualify for the Northern Border. I can't remember the name of all the acronyms that go with it, but that is an economic development related one that, but those things certainly should be investigated in order to consider this, because in addition to the plan itself, I worry, to be perfectly honest, less about building it than I do about taking care of it in the future, and who's going to do this? Who's going to operate a museum? Is the Historical Society going to be able to be there more than the time that it's open now? How will all of that work? And I think that as we look at this, that there also has to be a discussion of that second piece of this, because I have some experience with inheriting things that have been constructed with no way to take care of them once you did, and that becomes a problem. And so I think that to effectively assess this project and how it could best move forward, that we need to sort of think about, okay, if this is, then what? How will we manage this into the future as well before we take a step into that kind of commitment? Because it's, certainly beautiful, and it certainly is an enhancement, a huge enhancement over what's there. But how do we manage that without creating another cost center for the town to support? And that's what the things that you pay me to worry about. If we do this, how are we going to pay for it, and who's going to pay for it in the long term?
And how can it generate revenue?
Yeah.
Is that the best use for the downstairs? They want to make more space for a reason. Does the town want to do that?
Well, we have no studies that says how many people this is going to bring in. This is a huge number, and
Yeah, of course.
I mean, if we do nothing, are we going to see any return on this 2.2 million? I mean, or if we do nothing but fix the bathrooms that are down there. I mean, Rich, you said you replaced new toilets and stuff and those things there.
New toilets, new faucets, new sinks next
I mean, there hasn't been any sort of study of what this stuff brings in. For us to put this amount of money in, and all of a sudden we get 7 more people here. We've got a beautiful place, but people are still turning right. That looks nice, and we're going to keep going. There's been no look into what we are actually going to get out of this if we do it.
And how does it affect the business community?
Yeah, I mean, that's not, we're not here tonight, we're just here listening.
Looking,
Yeah,
right.
if we
Yes.
wanted to get more information
Right.
like that would be the next.
Well, I think that that they've done an excellent job of doing what
Well,
the
we
council
have-
asked them to
absolutely.
do,
Absolutely.
which is to bring this forward in a way that quantitatively gives the council the ability to look at this project in a realistic light, and to then say, okay, if this is what it is and how it might be, how do we assess its contribution to economic development in the downtown, and how do we plan for, if that works out, how do we plan for its long-term care and maintenance so that it stays a vital and beautiful part of what we have, without unnecessarily creating a tax burden for property taxpayers as another town entity to support. But I think this is a great foundation to move forward from, and I think that the next step, shall we say, is having this committee get information that starts to answer these kinds of questions, so that we can look at this.
Could the Historical Society, take on some not guidance, but, facilitate to help them to see their capacity, if they're going to be part of it?
Well, I'm assuming, which is always a dangerous thing to do, that the Historical Society is going to be an integral part of this moving forward discussion and and providing information in order to understand how it might be possible to do this, or if it's practical, all the if questions that we have now, that we have what the council asked for, which is this is what it would, this is how this would work. And now, should it work? How could it work? Who would take care of it? Da, da, da. Those are the questions that need to be.
Okay, so next steps to be determined. Any questions?
It almost seems like you would need some sort of revenue stream with it too. It's beautiful. I love it. I mean, it's awesome. I wish we could do it right away, but what revenue are we going to get from it?
I mean, I understand what you're saying with the revenue, but sometimes you spend money not, I mean, the return isn't money. I mean, does that make sense? Sometimes,
Sure.
sometimes, you know, I mean, and I love the concept. I think it's great. I'm confused on sort of how come, I mean, if we don't own the building, how we pay for the building, if that makes sense. It seems like we're always asked to do that as a town. But I think it's a great concept, and what it would do for down there is unbelievable. I think you could have things out behind it. I would just think it'd be great. I do have a question in reference to, so if you got $2.2 million today, you know, he wrote your check. How long would it be? Like, how long do you foresee this taking?
Well, if you did it today,
Well,
you'd
I'm
save
just-
about $70-some thousand because there's escalation in here in those estimates.
Yeah, right.
That's just salesmanship.
All right, I'll write your check.
But a project like this,
Sure.
now that we've done a portion of schematic design,
Mhm.
about a quarter, maybe, of the real thinking about it. It's conceptual. So there's schematic design, design development, construction documents, bidding, and you would want to bid something like this at the right time, which would be January, February, early when they're hungry, especially for works like this. You don't want to do something where you end up bidding in late spring or summer because of its infrastructure. The site guys would just throw numbers at it that you wouldn't believe. So if you started now, you could do that. If you started a full project, you know, a design, bid, build project. I'm assuming the town would want competitive bidding on a project like that. So what is that? Is that, you know, 6-8 months? You're ready to go, and you wait for the thaw. And you can do the demolition stuff while you're waiting. You could do submittals and stuff in the spring, and you could hit the ground as soon as you can move earth. And that's, you know, at first you got to move the building, and then you got to move a lot of earth, and cut away the asphalt and things like that. So
It would
Okay.
also require.
Couple years.
Well, it would
and
also
then to build
require.
it, another year.
Okay, so a couple years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Maybe not. Yeah, 2 years would be a safe thing.
It would require a vote by the community. There wouldn't be a recommendation, for me anyway, that we take more than a third of our undesignated fund balance to devote to one project without, it would need to be a bonded project unless you had grants, and anything over $250,000 requires a referendum vote by the community. So that's a cautionary note, that there would need to be a huge amount of public education before you ever put something like this in front of.
So if I could
community.
just, in the interest of time, if I can,
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap this up. The recommendation of the council is, well, the report of the council is basically we receive the report, and then next steps to be determined at this point in time going forward. Is that accurate? Okay. Thank you very, any comments from the public real quick? We've got a big agenda, but knowing that we're just moving on, we'll discuss this at a later time, but I'll take a question or two if you.
You have Don in the back.
Thank you for the presentation.
And thank you. That
Thank
was
you very much.
a really great presentation.
Hi, John Houghton, right certainly know no more than what most of the people in town know, so I won't comment specifically on this proposal. I will tell you, you may be surprised, it's not a huge amount compared to some things that people have done in other communities. But I speak from somebody who's built property that's now $30 million, kicking off money for a not-for-profit group. So I do know a little bit about the 13-year development process that we went through. I think people are already asking some of the right questions. If we spend whatever the money is, whatever the number is, will we get the town's investment back in some form? Not necessarily cash entirely, but is it well worth the investment? You're already asking that question. I would offer three things that I hope will be looked at. The estimates that have been offered, the really important issue when you look at an estimate of something that does not have anything to really, it's all on paper, is it being something that will be bid out competitively to union contractors for general contractor? Or is it going out to union contractors and open shop contractors? Or is it being bid out in a form where private contractors, including many of the small ones around here, could do it while working for general? Because you will find three different prices, and they vary tremendously. I couldn't believe the difference between what I first looked at, because I couldn't build it, to what I ended up building, because we couldn't afford to build it. And we're talking a seven-figure number was the difference between the two. The second thing I would suggest is there's a program that was rolled out just in the past 7 to 10 days from the state and the Maine Preservation Group, offering help, financial assistance in all kinds of forms to projects that were specifically involving something that was on the National Register. Doesn't mean you have to do it, doesn't mean you should do it, doesn't mean there aren't alternatives that in the long run are better to do as being suggested. Raise it up, forget about the National Register, and move on. But it would be good to look at what they're really offering. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to it because I'm not saving something on the National Register. Another 100 years I'll look at it for myself, because I will be on the National Register. The third thing I would suggest to anybody seriously contemplating this is a really beautiful project to look at just over the border from Calais. And it's the train station in St. Stephen's. That train station sat there for a lot of years. It was owned in part by the town, or in whole by the town. It was used as their library for a while, and then it went totally moribund. It's now functioning as a really fine quality restaurant that's bringing in people literally from 50 and 100 miles away to come to this particular restaurant. I'm not suggesting the answer to this depot is a restaurant, but it would be interesting to find out how they did what they did and how much it cost them to do it. They've turned their train platform into outside dining in the summer, and it's a 12-month-a-year restaurant that frankly provides some wonderful food, and it's tax-paying. And again, I'm not suggesting that's the answer, but it's right there on our doorstep, and it's a slightly larger depot
to
than
look
this
at.
one.
Thank you, Don.
And lastly,
Sorry, one more?
just
Okay.
lastly,
Good.
I'll leave it at that.
There'll be plenty of time
Sure.
for more down the road. All right, I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, the trash trailer repair proposal.
You have in your packet a short synopsis by our mechanic, Matt Pierce, of the need for the refurbishing of our second trash trailer. A couple of years ago, we did one of them. The comparative cost is, it's way cheaper to refurbish this than it is to go buy a new one. And because things may change in the future in the way we transport waste, we don't want to invest in a brand new one when we can refurbish what we have and keep it going. The last one we did was approximately the same price, and so I'm asking to use some of the funds from transfer station equipment reserve in order to refurbish this trailer so that it can give us another.
About $12,000 to do
Yes.
that.
Is this the hopper?
This is the,
No, it's the big blue trailer that we tow to the.
that they tow to the facility. They,
It attaches to the hopper.
The only question I had, I assume we're still, with that reserve is still accumulating or
Oh, yeah.
accruing for the eventual replacement. Okay. Any questions, concerns about that? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Route 46 plowing contract. We had, it looks like, 3 bids.
we had 3 bids on this, and you'll notice email from Maine Municipal in this, and it's from Maine Municipal Legal Services, and it's in there because one of the 3 bidders is a relative of our Public Works Director. Our Public Works Director has no legal or financial interest in the company that provided the bid. The bids were submitted to the town office, and the contract that we're discussing is the same contract that has been in place since before our current Works Director was our Public Works Director. But I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any considered conflict resulting from this if the council chose to award the bid to the low bidder, which was Landmark Contracting. So that's the reason for that. This was a precautionary move because I wanted to make sure that there was not a problem with this if you chose to move forward that way. And the other thing is that this contract is not decided by the Public Works Director. It's voted on by the council, which is outside of the
What was last year's contract?
78,000 and change.
So we have 3 bids. We had a bid of should I just read the name?
Yes. Yep.
$124,000 from Wardwell Construction. We had a bid of $98,440 from McIntyre Trucking, and the low bid was $78,700 from Lamfer Excavating. So we're looking for a recommendation from this committee to the council. So
That's
I'll take a
correct.
recommendation or any question.
I just have
Question?
couple questions for the contractor. John, how many vehicles do you have that you supply to plow that road with?
I have 3.
Full size?
I have 1 10-wheeler and 2 6-wheelers.
Okay. And do you
So
have,
I will have a spare.
okay. And you do other towns also?
I do another town. I do town of Castine.
And just so you know, I checked with the town of Castine.
Yeah.
There's been no issues.
Yeah, I
They're
checked
very
Sue.
satisfied
Sue had mentioned
with that also, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Paul?
I have a question. Who is going to be responsible for,
Me, I live out there.
well, then I think you might be partially right. In terms of every year, I'm sure we'll be taking a look at the performance. Who's going to be responsible for that performance review of how Route 46 has been plowed?
Generally speaking, that is the Public Works Director. Any questions or concerns generally go right by him, I can tell you, to me. But the final determinant is the council, because you award the contract on an annual basis. Back when you contracted with McIntyre the first time, you did a year, and then I believe you did a 3-year contract.
I was going to ask
following
that question. Have we
And
ever
so
done
the recommendation here, if you do this, is a 1-year contract, and if that is successful, consider a multi-year contract moving forward. That's what you did with McIntyre, because there's sort of a probationary period is the best way I can phrase it, but it's an assessment, a way to assess without committing yourself to 3 years up front that it's more difficult to get out of than.
And it truly was based on citizen input. I mean,
Yeah.
if people can't drive the road, and that road, as everybody knows, is one of the connectors that brings people in and
Right.
goes to work, so.
Yep. I just did want to ask the question just
Yeah.
because of the perception issue.
Mhm.
However, I know that Route 46, if it's not well maintained, is something that's talked
We'll
about
hear
very
about it.
quickly. That's right. Yep.
Any other questions?
So are we for recommending a one-year contract with a review next year for
That,
multi-year?
yeah, that, I was
The
just gonna.
contract's only 1 year anyway,
One,
so.
it's 1 year, so
Oh,
it's
is it
not,
every
it's
year?
not an
Yeah.
extension, it's not written in the contract that there will be an extension.
No.
It's just, okay.
Right.
I'm fine with
But then we
that.
can look at, like we did with McIntyre, and say, hey, it was a good job, we can extend it.
Extend it.
Okay.
No,
Any
I'm
questions
perfect
from
with
the public?
Why did Mr. McIntyre get done? Why did he have such a high jump in his bid? Anybody know?
I don't.
Mr. McIntyre had some conversations with Public Works that he was considering replacing equipment, and that the cost of replacing that equipment required him to raise his price significantly. That's what I know about that, and that the significance of what was requested required that this go to bid. Jumping a contract $20,000 because a contractor is buying equipment isn't, the town needs to put it out to bid again in order to figure out if that's still the right bid or if it's not. But it's my understanding that it was related to his desire to purchase new equipment that would need to be financed, and that he would need more money to do that.
Okay. I had one more question.
Sure.
What is the cost of us doing it ourselves, our public works department, taking that route over and doing it ourselves? Just straight 10 miles?
The 10 miles, including personnel, equipment, everything, is about $122,000 a year.
A year?
We went through this exercise when Mr. McIntyre indicated that he, in order to think about where that threshold is, in terms of when do we think about, well, we'll hire more people, but as long as the number to contract is significantly lower, we're better off not to add people and equipment to our services if we can still do that.
At that rate, where does that put us for the rest of our routes? Would it be cheaper for us to hire those out also?
Because of the location of this route, kind of off most everything else, it is it becomes more difficult to incorporate. The rest of our routes are all pretty much connected. 46 kind of hangs off the end is the best way that I can describe it. Contracting all the rest of the routes would leave the town with nothing to take care of the rest of the seasons as well, and Public Works works more than winter. It also has summer, spring, and fall road maintenance responsibilities unrelated to plowing. So that would be more difficult. But
Okay, we need the committee need a recommendation, or
Motion to send Lamper Excavations with a 78.7 bid through to the council.
we have a motion, second,
Excuse me.
all in favor? Vote. All right, we've got two small items, and we've got 10 seconds. No, we've got 30 seconds. Sue, the one is the request for benches bathroom facility at Miles Lane. What do we need to, you want to push those
a person
in?
came in and said that they wanted the town to consider that, with that at least installing a porta potty or something along the trails, because there are a lot of people that walk that
Need to go to the bathroom.
need to go to the bathroom. Or I'm thinking of the correct way to do this, but that's not it. So this item needs more time than this, and maybe it needs to go to recreation to look at in conjunction with the school, since Miles Lane's out there too. And the second item is a person, Mr. Grindle, asked whether the town would be interested in selling any property that we own out on Racecourse, a few acres. He wanted to purchase for the purpose of building a house.
Are they here tonight, or is that something we can pass to the next time around?
I don't think they're here. But we can, again, that's a,
Okay.
that's not something we had talked about.
Just we table that
own land
until
out
the
there?
next meeting, and with those last two, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?